in my view, the way I see it, the war between Iran and Israel has been sort of a culmination of this longer process for Iran when its grand strategy of how it projected power and trying to influence the region sort of failed through the dismantling of the proxy network, and then the war showed that the deterrent that maybe Iran had is sort of no longer there either. And I wonder, what do you think the view of all this, and what do you think the thinking about this is now in Tehran among the regime? Do you think that the people in charge of it acknowledge that the strategy they had so far more or less failed? And if that's the case, are they thinking about what to replace it with, or just double down and try the same thing again?
You know, the depressing thing, Dominic, which I think is that there's a hard core that think they've won, okay? And they think it's simply a case of rebuilding, the various things that they lost, okay? I have to say that reading between the lines, seeing that, I think it's a very, very small group of people now who think they've come out of this relatively well. I mean, and I'm talking about geopolitically. I mean, let's talk about the region. I think a lot of them now realize that Hezbollah, the whole debacle in Gaza, catastrophe in Gaza, really, the loss of Syria. I mean, I think the loss of Syria is what has been felt very, very acute. I think a lot of them realize now that this has been a fiasco. And I think you're quite right to say that I think there's outside the sort of the hardcore loyalists, there's a sort of realization that things have to change. So now, whether this will have an impact in some way in terms of policy making in the immediate future, I don't know, because I mean, the whole thing is a mess. And the reason why I say that is because their focus is internal. Their focus is not external anymore, right? Their focus is internal. But nonetheless, if you look at it, there was one person came out, and I thought very entertainingly, he said in the last war, i.e. the 12-day war, he said, Hezbollah offered a couple of pronouncements in our favor, but they didn't fire a single missile, he said, I think it's the most expensive pronouncement in history. We spent all this money and all they did was that. And basically they're sort of acknowledging that, there's a problem here, that their whole strategy in the Middle East has failed. Khamenei, until the beginning of this war, was quite convinced that, the tide would turn, and he would say repeatedly, he said, it's a matter of time before the Syrian people understand the error of their ways and come back and blah, 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 blah. I mean, obviously nothing like this it's not going to happen, right? And I think this, that sort of element of denial is now being replaced by an element of, we really have to rethink, what the hell is going on. And, there is an argument, and I know the New York Times, I think, has put this out, or I can't remember actually, the New York Times or Washington Post, you have to correct which one it is. One of the American papers, anyway, has said something like the more moderate voices have taken the upper hand in Iran. That is Pezeshkian and some of the others, and they want to rethink about it. Now, that's possible. I mean, I think it's too early to say whether they have a clear hand in this. I think the problem they have in Iran is that there are very many sort of hardliners who refuse to believe that they've been defeated. So the idea that this new revised approach is going to be led by people like Zarif and Pezeshkian and others, I certainly see that as the direction of travel. Whether they are the individuals who will be able to do it is another matter. You see, this is the problem. I mean, I think ultimately what you will get is an Iranian constellation, in a sense, of political leaders who will completely change that. They'll realize, there was someone actually said, I mean, it was a young person, not in a position of power, but he said, for 46 years, we have devised our global, our regional strategy on eliminating the state of Israel. Yeah. Why? I mean, it was very interesting to say, why are we doing it? This is clearly not working. Yeah, I mean, it's we have committed ourselves to this, and we have paid a great price, for this strategy, and it obviously hasn't worked. At least, it's not working now. So I think those ideas that are coming in are very, very important, very, very important. whether the group of people who are putting out, say Rouhani, Pezeshkian, Zarif, these other people, whether they are the ones to do it is another matter. Mir Hussein Mousavi, the old prime minister in the Iran-Iraq war, has now come out and said, "Oh, we need a referendum on government in Iran because the constitution is not working anymore." It's a very bold thing for him to say. Now, the interesting thing is he's one of the people, I would say, who has that sort of capacity to build a bridge from the Islamic Republic to what comes next. But again, I don't think he's the person who will be able to lead that, because he's also tainted a lot by, as much as he's much better than some of these people, and he's been in house arrest for so long. But at the same time, there is a wholesale rejection in Iran of the whole revolutionary sort of construct, from 79 onwards. They just want to get rid of it. Now, whether, it's possible to move in that direction and jettison everything that has happened since 79, including all the regional policy, whatever, is another matter. But it shows that, I think, in my view, views are quite polarized in these two different directions. And when I say polarized, I don't mean balanced, by the way. There's like 10% who hold very, very hard to the sort of revolutionary values. There's probably about 30% who hold very, very hard to rejection of 79. And then the other, 60% or whatever it is, are probably leaning towards that 30%, but haven't really made a decision. They're like in any political situation, you always get the majority of the population wait to see which way the wind is blowing, but I think in geopolitical terms, there is a realization, I think, that Khamenei, and they're blaming Khamenei for it, Khamenei's model for the regional situation has failed. Only the diehard loyalists are pretending that everything is fine. It's very comical alley type stuff from the Iran from the Gulf War, in 2003.
If you care about geopolitics, and I assume you do since you're listening to this, you might want to consider signing up to get my newsletter, Station Zero. Once every week or two, you'll get a free geopolitical analysis, a story, trend, or pattern of something that's really important, but that most people tend to miss. Like the one where I describe a chaotic oil war that's been going on between the US, Russia, and Saudi Arabia, that you basically never hear about, but that's quietly shaping geopolitics. If you want to sign up, just click the link in the description.